When you think of Pleasanton, what comes to mind? Maybe you think of the great parks and top schools, the beautiful hiking spots, the shops downtown, or the Meadowlark Dairy. Maybe you've visited the museum on Main or have gone paddle boating at Shadow Cliffs. Believe it or not, none of these Pleasanton institutions could exist without water. This water is made available to us through a complex process that ensures we have enough water to thrive. Now more than ever, it's important to conserve water to ensure water accessibility and security for ourselves and for future generations of Pleasanton residents. It's important to know how this water is supplied to us and why it's such a precious resource. We are fortunate enough to have a water delivery system known as the California State Water Project, or the SWP. It's the largest and most extensive state water project in the entire United States. The State Water Project runs from the northern Sierra Mountains down to the Los Angeles water system and Disneyland water fountains. It's a 400-mile journey.
So, State Water Project is a massive project. It's one of the biggest water projects ever built, ever by anyone. And right now, over 2/3, about 25 million Californians get their water, at least part of their water, from the State Water Project. A single water project delivers that much water up and down the state. The thing about 25 million Californians from one water system, it's huge.
But let's take a closer look at how SWP currently transports water to our homes. Water starts in the Pacific Ocean. The prevailing winds sweep evaporated water up and east into California. The increased altitude of the Sierra Nevadas catches the water and it precipitates down as snow, where it stays until it melts, giving California a vital supply of water. In fact, in a normal year, early spring snowpacks supply 18.6 trillion gallons of water. This is almost as much water as all of our other reservoirs combined. That means that in years with less than the normal amount of snow, California's water supply decreases significantly. Within the Sierras, water flows down the Feather River Watershed. A watershed is an area of land where all the water in snow, streams, and creeks flow to one larger body of water. The Feather River Watershed then flows to Lake Oroville, which provides almost all the water to California's State Water Project.
At the base of that watershed, they constructed a dam, and that dam is to form Lake Oroville, to store all that water that was running off from the Sierras. And this is a picture when there's a lot of water and spillway is spilling water into the lower Feather River. But that dam is not built out of concrete. A lot of dams are built out of concrete. This one is built out of earth and material, soil. And it's 770 feet high, and from one end to the other, more than a mile.
As the State Water Project's largest reservoir, with a capacity of 1.1 trillion gallons of water, Lake Oroville is able to satisfy up to 40% of California's urban water needs for 1 year. Then, from the Feather River, water travels south into the Sacramento River and flows into the San Joaquin Delta. From the Delta, the water is pumped into aqueducts. The South Bay Aqueduct brings water into Lake Del Valle. That is how treated water enters into the Pleasanton water delivery system. But what process does water take to be delivered into our homes? Every year, the Zone 7 Water Agency collects local surface water and a specific allotment of water from the State Water Project. The city of Pleasanton then purchases water from Zone 7 to sell to its residents. If you're a Pleasanton resident, your water bill is paid to the city of Pleasanton.
Yeah, but I wanted to underscore, just how big their responsibility is. I mean, they have to provide treated water to retailers. That means like the city of Pleasanton, the city of Livermore, and parts of San Ramon, the Doherty Valley area of San Ramon.
Zone 7 sends treated potable water to retailers in both the Tri-Valley and Doherty Valley. The agency also sends untreated water to nearly 3,500 acres of vineyards, all while protecting over 37 miles of flood protection channels. In total, Zone 7 serves over 260,000 residents and businesses.
So since our formation, and we've evolved to really be focused on these key areas: water supply, flood stream management, water quality, watershed protection, and groundwater management. So here we're looking at the entire Tri-Valley region. So we're looking at, the Doherty Valley region of San Ramon, Dublin, Pleasanton, Livermore. Within this region, you can see 7 provides about 80% of the water.
Pleasanton's water supply comes from both groundwater and surface water. Surface water is found in lakes, rivers, and streams, and is drawn into the public water supply by an intake. 70% of Pleasanton's water is surface water from the State Water Project, which is supplied through Zone 7 via Lake Del Valle. The other 10% of Pleasanton's surface water is collected through local rainfall in the Del Valle Reservoir. 11% of our water is groundwater. In order to collect groundwater, a well must be drilled into the underground aquifer in order to pump out water. Both Zone 7 and the City of Pleasanton operate these wells to tap into the groundwater basin. The last 9% of Pleasanton's water is recycled water used for irrigation around the city. Understanding where Pleasanton receives its water is critical, but we must also understand why it's important to conserve water even when we're not in a drought. Currently, Pleasanton has a relatively steady water supply, but we must continue to manage our water closely. Because we depend on the California State Water Project's water supply, it is important for us to conserve water, especially when our yearly allotment is lower than in previous years. The State Water Project infrastructure as a whole is aging. It's increasingly fragile and very dependent on external factors, such as earthquakes that could potentially interrupt our water transport. Additionally, the amount of water supplied each year is not always reliable. In years when we have smaller snowpack, the SWP cannot fully meet California's nor Pleasanton's water demands. This year, the SWP could only meet 20% of our requested water allocation due to low levels of snow found in the Sierra Nevada snowpack and Lake Pleasanton rain in March.
Living in California, we might have some rain years, but really we live mostly in a drought climate with some rain every now and then.
During the drought, as you can see from that picture on the right, there really just isn't the water. During that year, the folks who are contracting water from the state, including Pleasanton Zone 7 Water Agency, only got 5%, 5 to 10% of what we contract for. So that means that if we didn't have other water supplies, if we didn't have other plans in place, they'd be asking to cut back our water use by 90%. That's huge.
If you lived in Pleasanton in the last decade, you may remember the droughts we experienced, especially the most recent, from 2012 to 2017. Understanding how Pleasanton's climate shifts into extensive dry and short wet years highlights the importance of careful management of our water consumption.
The droughts have been and will be a part of our future, and we need to plan for them. We need to make sure that we have enough water one way or another to get through those long dry spells.
To best illustrate the power of water conservation, Eric Cartwright offered a striking hypothetical example.
Okay, so this is my favorite slide. I love doing this. So we're going to talk about this town, and I just for the fun of it, I called it Pleasanton.
The horizontal axis represents years, while the vertical axis represents water quantity. Specifically regarding this water supply is a red line representing water demand, alongside blue bars representing water that's supplied each year. As we know, the State Water Project deposits excess water into Lake Del Valle, represented by blue above the red line. But now, imagine if water demand was precisely equal to water supply. While this is great and all, what if the preceding year's water is significantly less? If water supply strays far from water demand, it's a problem. The solution? Well, the first step is lowering water demand, also known as water conservation. This lowers the red line. Plus, now that there's saved up excess water, Zone 7 sends water south to the California Aqueduct to be stored in Kern County groundwater banks. This way, during the next dry year, this water credit can be cashed in to supplement the allocation of water from the state water project. In other words, old water excess can remediate new water shortages. We can also cut back on Pleasanton's water demand now by reducing wastefulness, such as fixing building leaks or stopping the water faucet from running unnecessarily.
The typical household in California will use more than 200 gallons per day on average.
Yeah, so we're a family of 3 members, so we use water like for regular usage, for shower, toilet flushes, dishwashing, and then water heater. So apart from that, we use water for our lawn in the front yard and for all the plants around the house. So our water usage daily, average daily water usage is around 150 gallons per day, which is a little more than the actual average daily usage in California. So I think we need to learn techniques of how to, utilize water appropriately and efficiently. So we'll probably need to learn more information and cut down the water usage for our home.
The main ways I use water every day is for cleaning, drinking, and going to the bathroom. And I feel like recently with the virus going around, I've been using a lot more water for cleaning, especially for washing my hands more often, doing laundry more often, and cleaning surfaces more often. There's also been a leaking faucet in my bathroom that I haven't gotten fixed yet, which has led to another excess. But those are most of my excesses, I believe.
So now that we know water use is a problem, how exactly do we start conserving? Let's look at a breakdown of how we use our water first.
Single-family customers, we want to know in a year, how do they use their water? A good deal of water is spent outdoors and indoors, almost 50-50. This is kind of the typical proportion of how water is used in a household, but what's really important to see here is the way you can really get water use down in this household is, one, get rid of the leaks. You just turn down your water use by 14% if you just find and repair your leaks. And then how about the type of toilet that they use or the type of water fixtures? And that's a great way of using water in a sense where you don't have to think about it too much. It's just much more efficient that way.
I'm Lance Smith. I'm Julia Smith's father, and I live here in Pleasanton. I'm a homeowner. Yeah, so leaks in the home. Your toilet is a very common source of leaks. No flapper valve can leak, and but generally you'll hear it. When it gets bad, you'll hear it and you'll know that, all right, that's time to change the flapper valve. But there's not like leaks in the walls of a house. Mm-hmm. I mean, it'd be a bad situation if the water pipes were leaking in your house.
Yeah. So what do you think someone can do to decrease this water waste?
Well, listen to the toilets. I mean, if the toilets are leaking, you can fix that. That's quick and easy. Any handyman kind of person, you don't need to pay anybody to do that.
Pleasanton residents can utilize the city's Smart Water portal to access information about water usage in their own homes. In order to save water, we need to start with knowing how our water is being used.
Something that we have available to any water customer is our Smart Water portal. And when a customer signs up for this, they can also set it to allow them to be notified automatically if they have constant consumption. So that means that there's suspicion that there's probably a leak going on. It has the ability to show you on an hourly basis what the water use is like in your home.
So how can this information help you with your water conservation journey?
An estimate of how much gallons per minute we're using in the shower. Mm-hmm. And then we can time ourselves in the shower and think of how much water we're using.
Yeah. So also using the Smart Water portal, you can see compared to other years how well you were doing, right? So how do you think that can help you with your water conservation?
Well, you could set goals, I suppose, to use less each year, and continually get better.
And track it on the website.
You could track it, yeah.
So what do you think you can do to decrease the amount you spend?
I can ask my daughter to take shorter showers. Do you think that'll work?
Okay. And what else do you think?
Well, I might take shorter showers too.
Residents can make a difference in their community as well as in their own homes.
I don't know if you are familiar with our mobile citizen app that we have, but it's an application that goes on your phone. And basically, if you're around town and you spot something like that, like water that's leaking out from someplace and entering into a storm drain, or it just seems like a waste of water that's abnormal, you can actually go into that app and submit to us a water conservation observation, and our staff will respond to that as well too.
This allows you to easily and quickly report leaking hydrants or broken sprinkler heads to the City Operations Service Center to get it fixed right away. The next step is to rethink the way you use water, and it's easier than you might think.
Our prioritization first level when it comes to water conservation is eliminating water waste. So the type of waste that are just unnecessary, that really comes from, breaks or leaks. You can see in the aerial view of this one large landscape just how much water runoff has come off of their irrigation when they've used it for one cycle. There's no plants there, it's just running right off of that landscaping. So finding ways to eliminate the unnecessary water waste is a huge component to helping people conserve water altogether.
Replacing old shower heads and toilets can also help you reduce your water footprint. High-flow toilets and shower heads use 5 times as many gallons of water compared to low-flow toilets and shower heads. By replacing these household appliances, a family of 4 can save around 16,000 gallons of water per year. However, indoor water use, whether at home or in a business, is only part of our water use. What can we do to conserve the water we use outside of our homes?
One of my favorite things to take a look at is the old lawn, and something that many of us have grown up with, we get used to, and then you say, well, wait a second, do we really need all that lawn? It sure is using a lot of water. It's sure taking up my Saturdays, mowing the lawn, aerating the lawn, applying chemicals to the lawn. And my neighbor over there just installed a drought-tolerant garden, and he's saving a ton of money. Doesn't have to mow it every week, and it's good for the environment. It's to me, it's the future of water conservation.
Plus, saving water saves you money.
We also offer a water efficient landscape rebate. So now on the longer term thinking, when we're talking and trying to tell customers different ways or encouraging them to say, well, here's what you can do long term is help reduce water use. One of the biggest things you can do is move into what we call climate appropriate landscaping. So these are plants that are either not necessarily native, but they are definitely more hardy when it comes to drier weather. We also think of this program pretty holistically. What that means is we also try to educate and encourage how to basically convert, say, a water-thirsty lawn into a drought-tolerant landscape, do it in a sustainable fashion.
Through the program, residential customers can receive up to $1,000 in rebate, receiving 25 cents per square foot. This is a great incentive for making your yard water efficient.
Hi, I'm Irene Inman, and I'm a Pleasanton resident. I've lived here for 20 years since my retirement.
How long have you lived in this house?
About 17 years.
And so, was the original landscaping this?
No, it was grass.
And why did you remove the grass?
For several reasons. One, to save water, and a few other ones. It was a lot of work.
How much water have you saved compared to the years before?
Roughly about 7,000, a little over 7,000 gallons a month in the summer months.
And will you change your front yard to be drought resistant?
Thinking about it.
Yeah? Okay.
While you're conserving water at home, the city of Pleasanton is also trying to decrease their water usage as a whole. It's important that residents are aware of the decisions that the city is making about our water. You can stay informed by attending City Council and Zone 7 board meetings, which are open to the public, and keeping up to date with the latest updates and virtual events regarding our water management and usage. Staying educated on Pleasanton's water usage will help residents make informed decisions when voting on local water-related issues. Although Pleasanton residents are not direct customers of Zone 7 because our city buys water from Zone 7 for us, we can still vote for their board members and have an impact on how our water is handled. The Pleasanton City Council makes a lot of decisions that impact the quality of our drinking water from Pleasanton wells, so it's important to know where our mayor and city council stand on water issues. One of the ways the city is managing their water usage is through the Climate Action Plan, or CAP, written in 2012. This document outlines how the city has been making decisions about water for the last 8 years. A CAP 2.0 will be released in 2020.
So the three main strategies are the community building and landscape design improvements, municipal building and landscape improvements, and then finally increasing or establishing the use of reclaimed or gray water systems.
In addition to the Climate Action Plan, Pleasanton also has a general plan to guide our community through 2025. The water element of the general plan, published in 2009, essentially serves as a guide for the city of Pleasanton in terms of progression with water management. There are 8 policies that are outlined within the water element, all of which feed into the main goal: ensuring a safe, healthy water supply for the city and conserving resources for the future as well. For instance, in 2015, the City of Pleasanton completed their Purple Pipes project, bringing recycled water to water community parks. Rather than using clean, potable drinking water, the City of Pleasanton has already saved 450 million gallons of clean water by using recycled water to water its parks. As a part of the general plan, Pleasanton has been working on increasing the use of reclaimed and recycled water in parks with heavy amounts of landscaping irrigation, such as the Hacienda Business Park, Pleasanton Sports and Recreation Park, and Pleasanton Tennis and Community Park. Understanding that Pleasanton is located in a region characterized by droughts and dry weather, it is imperative that we manage our water supply sustainably. By introducing water conservation techniques into your life, you can help your community become a more drought-tolerant city. After all, water conservation is a community effort, and we all have our parts to play in ensuring a bright, water-filled future for our community.
So, you just learned about what Pleasanton's water looks like today. But how did we get here? Understanding how land was managed centuries ago can help us understand why we see the landscape patterns we live in today. This in turn will help us design more resilient landscapes for the future. Let's take a look back to the pre-contact era, around 1750, before the Spanish explorers arrived. Thousands of years ago, Pleasanton was situated on a 2,600-acre freshwater marsh. The marsh was filled with open water ponds, dense willow thickets, and wildlife, such as grizzly bears, yellow-billed cuckoos, and steelhead trout. None of this wildlife exists in present-day Pleasanton, so you can imagine how much has changed in the past 300 years. At that time, the only inhabitants of the Pleasanton area were Native Americans, specifically the Pelnan that lived in the Pleasanton-Dublin region, the Siouan in Dublin, and the Siouan north of Hacienda Crossings.
Their water use was actually pretty light, mostly drinking, cooking, and washing, and a little used in making things. But they also relied on the plants and animals of the wetlands for food and for materials. Fish, birds, and tule reed, just to cite a few examples.
This all changed in 1797, when Spanish conquistadors established Mission San Jose in modern-day Fremont. Along with the arrival of the Spanish came the introduction of new livestock. This turned the valley into grazing land for over 50,000 cattle and sheep.
Now, while these cattle, sheep, and horses drink water, probably a lot more than people and animals altogether used before the invasion, but it still doesn't register as a major depletion or alteration of the supply. There's no attempt to drain the marsh or bring water in from elsewhere. And that continues up until the 1860s. But in 1864, there's a major drought, and it kills off thousands of livestock. And a lot of the ranchers there, because they've got taxes and things to pay, decide that they need to sell off, and they start selling off to farmers who are going to engage in grain agriculture.
The completion of the Western Pacific Railroad in 1869 not only connected Pleasanton to San Francisco, but also tripled Pleasanton's population. However, as Pleasanton's population grew, San Francisco's and the rest of the Bay Area's population grew even faster. The Bay Area's exploding population brought a demand for food crops. With the railroad's efficient transportation, Pleasanton was able to satisfy the new demand for crops and thus shifted its economy from cattle-based to agriculture. With Pleasanton's agricultural economy and industry booming, farmers needed more land. To meet this demand, Pleasanton's marshland was drained and farmed over in 1880. Originally, Pleasanton's water table was very high, and residents didn't have to dig very deep to reach water. Artesian wells were installed throughout the area, and no pumping was required to extract water, allowing for a constant, easily accessible supply. In 1890, Spring Valley Water Company, San Francisco's water supplier, began purchasing land in the Niles Canyon, Alameda Creek, and Arroyo de la Laguna to export millions of gallons of water to San Francisco. Water flowed into this land from the Pleasanton Marsh and the Arroyo del Valle, which were important water sources for Pleasanton farmers. This greatly decreased Pleasanton's water supply. By 1900, Pleasanton's water table had decreased so much that the remainder of Pleasanton's marsh, as well as its flora and fauna, had drained and disappeared, creating the landscape we see today.
By the mid-1890s, Pleasanton's water table was so low that artesian wells were rendered useless. Citizens' need for water drove the city to establish a central water system in 1902. East of Pleasanton, where McKinley Park stands today, a motorized waterworks was built with pumps and mains that would pipe running water into Pleasanton homes and businesses. This system pumped 85,000 gallons a day.
However, this central water system was only reliable for a year. In June of 1903, water supply once again became a problem and continued to get worse. Pleasanton's water table dropped significantly, and the population surpassed 1,000. With more people came growing water demand, and these pipes and pumps could not keep up.
So the city ended up signing a contract with Spring Valley Water Company to provide supplemental water deliveries in the summer of 1916. And although Spring Valley was extracting Pleasanton's groundwater, the city's wells could no longer hit the depths that they were reaching, and therefore they needed to get water from another source that had more money and better machinery, such as the dedicated water company of the city of San Francisco.
In 1930, San Francisco bought Spring Valley Water Company, and with that, Pleasanton's water contract transferred to the city of San Francisco. This contract continued until the 1960s, when the State Water Project began delivering water to Pleasanton. From the 1890s to the 1960s, 10 million gallons of water were pumped out of the valley every day. A few additional events helped develop the water infrastructure we see today in Pleasanton. With the U.S. declaration of war on Japan in the early 1940s, the Parks and Shoemaker Naval Base complexes were built in the Tri-Valley. With the bases came 40,000 new residents.
So suddenly, this valley that people really hadn't thought could support, more than 15 or 20,000 folks, has got a total population of close to 50,000 by the final year of the war.
Without a source of water, they couldn't grow. And back when Pleasanton began to grow, when I first came out here for the first time back in the 1950s, the population of Pleasanton was probably about 2,500 people. And so, what is it today? About 75,000 people. So they had to have water in order to grow. And so they wouldn't have had any of the development out here if they didn't have a stable water supply.
As is typical of marsh areas, Pleasanton is located at the lowest point in the valley, making it a prime location for floods, a characteristic of marsh areas. A series of devastating floods occurred in 1955, which led to the formation of the Zone 7 Water Agency in 1957. Zone 7's primary goal was to reduce flooding by canalizing both Arroyo del Valle and Arroyo Mocho to divert water away from the new city development where the marsh once was.
We formed Zone 7 in 1957, formed the board of directors, and put together a program to both improve the flood control area and solve the problem of flooding up here, and also to provide a water source, another water source.
In order to guarantee that all California residents had a safe, reliable source of water, the State Water Project was introduced and built in the 1960s. To ensure that the Tri-Valley would benefit from the lake's water supply, Zone 7 service area residents voted to approve a bond measure to help finance flood control, water conservation and supply, including the State Water Project. In 1962, Zone 7 began collecting water from the State Water Project in order to recharge Pleasanton groundwater.
What we did in Zone 7 then was put together a program in 1960 to take water from the South Bay Aqueduct and bring it in to Livermore, Pleasanton, and Dublin area.
Lake Del Valle Reservoir was built in 1968 as a part of the State Water Project. The reservoir is still used today to store water for Pleasanton residents. Between 1968 and today, there have been a number of natural occurrences and developments that have impacted Pleasanton's water infrastructure. There were multiple droughts, including one in 1977 and another in 1989. In 1981, Pleasanton expanded its water storage by filling its abandoned quarries and forming the chain of lakes between Livermore and Pleasanton. And most recently, Zone 7 adopted water conservation measures and rebate programs in 1992. Clearly, Pleasanton has gone through many developments in terms of its water systems. We went from a 2,600-acre freshwater marsh, to grazing lands, to using wells, to using reservoirs, canals, wells, and a well-developed wastewater treatment center. Now, 200 years later, things are still evolving. With droughts becoming a more regular occurrence, we must adapt and prepare ourselves for drier weather.
Now, what's happening is there's problems with drought, which has reduced the amount of water that's available in the north, and that puts on the development in the south. And the new sources of water are probably number one will be to conserve and use our water more effectively that we have, and then also to develop other sources of water that may be from seawater and other areas of reclamation and reclaiming water that is now wastewater.
As the climate and the environment around us continue to change, we must evolve with it, just as the Native Americans, Spanish conquistadors, rancheros, farmers, and the Pleasantonians before us once did.
In 21st century news, the issue of climate change is talked about again and again. From greenhouse gas emissions warming our atmosphere to massive deforestation of the rainforest, many of us have learned at least a little about global warming and the depletion of Earth's resources.
We often forget that the planet is made up, 70% of the planet is made up of water, okay? We all know that. But as we also know, a big chunk of it is the ocean, and we also know that the amount of drinking water is pretty finite. I mean, so we know that there's only so much water that we can use, and it's a resource that we should preserve and protect. But we also know we've been consuming way too much of it. We don't really understand, and we actually don't think about it. And there are so many things that we all do every single day without thinking. What is this going to mean for the future? Yeah, in terms of what's it going to do for our economy if we run out of water? What's it going to do for and jobs in our city? And what's it going to do in terms of the health impacts, the public health effects? And what does it mean for me in terms of not having access to good, clean, affordable water? Because one thing for sure, when you start running out of water, you're going to have to pay for it a lot more.
However, much of what we learn about climate change discusses the issue on a global scale. A lot of us don't know much of anything about how climate change impacts us right here in Pleasanton, except for maybe that our summers are getting hotter. What will become of Pleasanton? What will become of our water? And most importantly, what can we do to prevent it? Admittedly, it can get pretty overwhelming to think about climate change's effects on the globe, and naturally, climate change sounds difficult to tackle on any scale, globally and locally. Let's take a look at the risks Pleasanton is facing by looking at what has been done and what can be done. As residents of California, we face risks of climate change with an increase in droughts.
In the next 50 years, my guess is if we're lucky, we might have maybe half those years without drought. I think most likely it's going to be more than half those years with droughts.
We have already seen how a drought can affect Pleasanton's water supply, and it is important that we prepare for this risk. But while it is true that a drought will negatively affect Pleasanton's water supply, it is a somewhat familiar risk. What are other things that we need to prepare for? As we mentioned earlier, changing climate patterns will result in less snowpack in the Sierras. According to the San Francisco Regional Report of the 4th California Climate Change Assessment, snowpack is projected to decline by nearly 20% in the next 2 to 3 decades, 30% to 60% by the mid-century, and by over 80% in the late century. This means the State Water Project will have less water to distribute to California residents. Limited rainfall is also detrimental to our city's water supply. Such a decrease in local precipitation will substantially decrease flows into our arroyos and natural groundwater recharge in the region. Since Pleasanton is located in an arid region, without Zone 7's water releases, the arroyos will return to its natural state, a dry creek bed. This in turn will impact the local ecosystem and wildlife that have been dependent on the arroyo's water. Laura Ditto, a Pleasanton elementary school teacher and longtime resident, describes how the Arroyo Valle transformed from a splashing creek fit for ducks and fish to a dry one.
Yeah, I have a grandson who's 22 months, and he came down and just absolutely loved it. The water was rushing. We saw lots of ducks. We saw baby ducks. We threw leaves into the water and watched the leaves travel downstream. Yeah, we had a great time.
How long ago was that?
That was 2 to 3 weeks ago.
And you were here a couple days ago. What did it look like then?
It looked like this. And you can show them, I imagine. It's just completely dry. Actually, 2 to 3 days ago, there were some puddles of water with crayfish and large fish, small fish, and a goldfish swimming around. and they look stressed, searching for water.
We can also expect a change in how the Pleasanton community connects with the arroyo.
When I think of the creek, I think of the perfect ecosystem, something that I learned so much from and something that was really thriving. When I think of Pleasanton, one of the first things that comes to mind is definitely the creek. I mean, even since middle school, my friends and I have been coming here just to hang out. Everyone at Amador Valley in the biology classes learns so much from the creek. I mean, even downtown, we have the dairy and we have the people walking up and down the streets with the cute little shops and the restaurants. You know, if there's anything that I've taken away from this internship and my experiences here, it's that water is not just something that's a utility, but a really, really strong source of community.
The water we get from the Arroyo Valle is the rain that Lake Del Valle collects. According to the Zone 7 Water Supply Evaluation Update of 2016, forecasts show that the median rainfall is expected to decrease by 2 inches per year. Such a decrease in local precipitation could substantially decrease flows in Alameda Creek and natural groundwater recharge in the region. This decrease in rainfall also threatens our groundwater, since rainwater recharges our groundwater supply. Under the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, Zone 7 has been an official groundwater sustainability agency since 2016. This means they are in charge of managing the Livermore Valley groundwater basin to assure that it is sustainable and that we do not pull too much water out of it. 90% of our water supply is vulnerable, but Zone 7 is on it and has plans to help mitigate the problem. According to Zone 7's Water Supply Evaluation Update, beginning in 2020, they plan to build a 6-mile pipeline from Cope Lake to Del Valle and a 12 million gallons per day pumping station. This will allow Zone 7 to better manage local water supplies, recharge the local groundwater basin, and increase local water storage ability. To manage our water supply, Zone 7 has also partnered with the Bay Area Regional Reliability Group, or BAR. BAR is made up of 8 of the primary water agencies in the Bay Area. All members agreed to evaluate their water supplies to best combat climate change and its effects from a regional standpoint. BAR is considering a number of alternatives to secure our future's water supply, including collecting stormwater and implementing potable water reuse. The last 9% of our water is recycled water from Pleasanton's Purple Pipes project, which we touched on earlier. As of July 2020, the Purple Pipes project has reached its limit, but the agency that supplies the recycled water, DSRSD, is looking into expansions. As our population grows, we will have more wastewater to recycle. Another possibility is utilizing fringe groundwater that is not clean enough to be potable. In general, the project has been extremely successful, with 100% of wastewater entering the plant being recycled in the summer months. But you can help too.
But there's a massive amount that we could do in our personal day-to-day lives just to think about the way that we can do some small things here and there that can reduce our total water footprint.
We have already talked about how decreasing water demand can increase water reliability, and hopefully now you can see why that is so important. Israel and Australia have very similar climates to California, and their citizens use 65 to 90 gallons per capita per day, while we in the Bay Area use 104 gallons per capita per day. If they can do it, we can do it too. In addition to decreased water supply, we are also facing increased water demand.
As you know, our population here in the Tri-Valley region, it's grown a lot and projected to continue to grow. And so these are the projections that we have for the Tri-Valley population growth. And more people generally means more water demand, although I can say collectively we are better at being more water conscious in terms of, buying water efficient washing machines and also, water efficient toilets. And maybe some people are creating drought tolerant gardens instead of very thirsty green grass. So there are some things that we are doing, as consumers, as individuals, also our businesses in terms of their irrigation needs, that's, decreasing that demand on our water.
We will not just need more water due to increased population, but also because it will be hotter.
I know we've never had summers as hot as they've been in the last 5 years.
The 2017 Bar Drought Contingency Plan clearly shows that the Bay Area, including Pleasanton, doesn't have the facilities to handle that kind of demand. With current infrastructure, it is predicted that in the near future, Zone 7's water demand will be 72,000 acre-feet per year. But in the case of a one-year-long drought, our supply would be closer to 50,000 acre-feet per year. To compensate for our deteriorating infrastructure and inadequate water supply, BAR recommends investing in expanded water storage, as well as water transportation between systems. Securing our water supply for the future will require investment in infrastructure, and it's important to plan ahead for the funding we will need.
Individuals need to understand they have a lot of power. Increasingly, digital media and social media gives you even more power because you can go direct to power. You could tweet whoever you want, right?
On a more local level, Pleasanton is guided by the Pleasanton Climate Action Plan. Though it evolves to meet new obstacles, its goals remain the same. Reduce greenhouse gas emissions, prepare Pleasanton for current and future climate change impacts, and build community resiliency to adapt to variable conditions. One of the main objectives of the Pleasanton Climate Action Plan is to reduce water use by community and municipal buildings by promoting the use of recycled water, offering rebates for conservation devices, and incentivizing reduction in outdoor irrigation. These conservation methods are essential to protecting Pleasanton's water supply. Pleasanton has a long history of investing in the next generation. Our schools, parks, sports, and arts programs provide ample evidence that our city cares about kids. Ensuring that Pleasanton will have a safe, reliable water supply for years to come is essential if we want future Pleasantonians to enjoy the community we know and love today. This is why we need to conserve water now and invest in modern water delivery infrastructure.
Hi, my name is Siri Sridhar and I'm going into 4th grade at Moore Elementary School in Pleasanton. Climate change makes me feel like I really want to find a way that I can fight it. I think we can still fix it. I take showers, drink it, wash my hands with it. I think that I try to save water by trying to remember to turn off faucets and not use as much water.
We may not be able to see exactly what our future will look like, but we know that our city's water future is at risk because of climate change. And after looking into Pleasanton's past and our present water stories, we now know for sure that water conservation must be a part of our future. It is vital to take action that will make us ready for climate change on a local level, and to invest in creating a reliable water supply for our community to thrive for generations to come. We as individuals are equipped to be change makers within our community. We can use our resources and make a difference.